Okay, well, I believe we're live, so I will kick off. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Radyr Hustings. My name is Tom Evans. I'm the Vice Chair of the Radyr Morganstown Association, who have organised this event, and I've been asked to chair tonight's meeting. As I'm sure we're all aware, the Senedd Elections will be held on Thursday, the 6th of May, and in accordance with our Constitution and as a public service, we've arranged this event to support the democratic process and facilitate public debate. I will shortly introduce the candidates, but before I do so, I wanted to quickly run through some of the practicalities, including the format for tonight's meeting. Each political party on the constituency ballot paper for the 2021 Senedd election was invited to fill one seat this evening by their choice of candidate from either the Cardiff West constituency or the South Wales Central Regional list. We've invited residents to submit their questions in advance of the meeting, and from these submissions we've created a short list of 6 that cover a wide and diverse range of topics. These questions have been shared with the candidates in advance of this evening. I will invite each candidate in turn to respond to each. Each candidate will have a maximum of 2 minutes to respond to each question, and I will rotate the order in which I invite the responses to ensure fairness. At the end of the 6 questions, there will be a further 2 minutes per candidate available to allow a statement to voters, including any responses to points made by others during the questions. Interruptions are not permitted throughout the meeting, and we will enforce the 2-minute allowance to ensure we are able to get through all the questions in a timely manner. Okay, so with the formalities taken care of, it is my pleasure to introduce the following candidates. So for the Conservative Party,
Sean Driscoll.
Thank you, Sean. And for the Green Party,
David Griffin.
Thank you, David. For the Labour Party,
Ruba Sivanyanam.
Thank you, Ruba. For the Liberal Democrats,
Heath Marshall.
Thank you, Heath. For Plaid Cymru,
Rhys Bowen.
thanks, Rhys. And for Propel, Neil, you might have been on mute possibly then.
Yeah, Neil McAvoy.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, well, good evening all, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. It's very much appreciated. So I'm going to roll straight into the first question, titled Reopening After COVID-19. If candidates, like the bulk of the Welsh public, agree we need to open up cautiously after COVID, and many political parties and interest groups are arguing that different areas should be opened first, what area would you not open and why? No party ever suggests what should remain closed. We only hear what should be opened. And I will invite Sean Driscoll to answer first, please.
Yes, thank you. I can't think of any legitimate business that should remain closed other than a business that is not keeping the staff or customers safe by adhering to the rules. Football and large spectator venues, will think we can overcome that. I was one of those people who thought we should be careful and cautious to avoid any new wave of COVID outbreaks. And I was with Mark Drakeford right up until the essential products fiasco and the delays to providing grants for small businesses. The pubs and shops in Llanrwst were doing amazing jobs keeping customers, and I'd say it could be argued they were safer places than supermarkets. Also, keeping competitive swimmers from training has been absolutely ridiculous. They are literally swimming in chlorine with almost zero chance of catching COVID. But the hugely successful rollout of the vaccination programme across the United Kingdom, with the British Army, NHS staff and volunteers doing amazing work to get, what is it now, some 32 million people across the UK now vaccinated. The best of Wales when everyone has worked together in the national interest. And with recent figures now so low, I believe at times we've been overcautious and simply doing things just to be different for the sake of it. It's been a tough time for all businesses, especially hospitality, where lots of young people are employed. The UK government grant and furlough schemes have meant many businesses have survived. but they can't survive much longer and need to get trading again, and that's including gymnasiums. As the official opposition in the Welsh Government, we've been pushing them hard for a plan to get all businesses back open in a safe way that protects jobs, protects the economy, and gets Wales back on for business and give the country some certainty. Thank you.
Thank you. David Griffin of the Green Party, please.
Yeah, I think, thanks very much for inviting me. I think we should be guided by the science, of course, on all of this. I think if people want to meet outdoors, there is very little risk. I think if people are meeting in well-managed hospitality venues, there is little risk. I think the places where we have to agree there is still risk if there is an incidence of the virus that could spread in the population are close-packed indoor venues. So nightclubs and music concerts are probably the most risky things people could attend while there is still an incidence of virus in the population. However, as we continue to roll forward with the fantastic vaccination program, the risk of this is going to be going down with every passing day. So I think we should always be guided by the numbers, and we should watch closely. And I think we should be opening up in a stepwise fashion and watching the data as we go. So if anything does surprise us, we have a chance to react to it rather than end up reacting late and having to overcorrect. But I think I would agree there's been some restrictions on outdoor sports or certain sports, just like swimming, which don't seem to make sense. I'm myself a keen cyclist, and we've abided by all the rules, but it's very hard to see a risk from 4 people out cycling together, for example, in the early days. So, like I say, the data would probably show that putting a lot of people together for several hours in a sweaty nightclub when they've been drinking is not going to result in social distance behavior, but it's a lower risk population. So we should be guided by the numbers, and we should move as fast as possible to recover the economy while watching the numbers so we don't take any steps backwards.
Thank you. I now invite Heath Marshall of the Liberal Democrats.
Yes, hello, good evening. I think it's very important that political decisions are based obviously on the science. So far to date, obviously there's been a lot of success in the distribution of the vaccines. As people are becoming vaccinated, as one of the quickest rates in the world, of course, there's going to be obviously a less risk of contracting the virus. Having said that, it's important that those activities which can cause a problem with the transmission of the virus, whether it's indoors, nightclubs, socializing in pubs, these kind of venues have to be regulated. Obviously, it's very difficult to socially distance within those environments. But I would like to concentrate on how successful I think remote working has been. I think that's something which needs to be encouraged, and I would not encourage going back to work if people can work effectively from home. So I think there needs to be more encouragement of that from the Welsh Government, and I think employers need to ensure that they have proper infrastructure for their employees and enable their employees to work from home when they can. So I think that's an important point going forward. So apart from that, I think that so far to date, I think it's the reintegration into society has been quite successful, and I don't see that we should be restricting any more businesses at this particular point in time. But as I said, it's based on the scientific advice and guidance, which I think is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil McAvoy, Propel.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think we should already be out of lockdown. Lockdown is a hugely damaging policy. I think it's important to understand that we've never had a zero COVID policy at all. The airports remained open, the ports remained open. There was no testing of people coming in. The policies have been extreme, really. And I think I'd like to quote from the technical advisory group who provided evidence of cost benefits to the Welsh Government. And what they said was that with a prolonged lockdown that we have, and it's been the worst of all worlds really, because it's not really been, it wasn't I'd say a complete lockdown. But what is found is that the present policy does significant long-term harm in social and economic damage, and in some environments that damage becoming permanent. We have children who have lost a year's worth of education. The whole economy has been closed down. Poverty kills. Many of us know people who have taken their own lives. I want to quote as well directly from the study. And if you look at the closure of non-essential retail, of gyms, hospitality, the effect of that, according to the government, the Welsh government, is 0.1% or 0.2% on the rate of infection, the R rate. And the crucial thing is that the government says that they have low to moderate confidence in that. So what we've had are really extreme policies closing everything down for minimal benefit, they think, and they're not even sure of that. If you look at countries like Sweden, where they didn't have complete lockdowns, there was no huge spike in deaths overall. We hear today that the average death age is 82 years of age. We now learn that there's a 1 in 10,000 chance of picking something up off a surface. We've also learned recently, it's been admitted that there's very little chance of picking something up.
I'm afraid we've run out of 2 minutes there, Neil. Apologies. Rhys Abowen, Plaid Cymru, please.
Thank you very much. Unsurprisingly, I don't agree with that last contribution. I'm surprised that Sweden is used as a beacon of example when it's done far worse than Norway and Finland. I support the cautious approach out of lockdown led by the science. We must avoid going back into lockdown, and that'll be bad for the economy, for mental health, for the well-being of everyone. Now, what would I want to remain closed? Well, what I'd want to remain closed is the place where I volunteer for the homeless in the city centre. That has been giving tea for the homeless for 40 years. It came to a stop during COVID, and all credit to Cardiff Council. They've taken homelessness off the streets, and that needs to continue. I don't want the homeless tea to reopen in the city centre. We need affordable housing as part of Plaid Cymru's fully costed manifesto, verified by 2 of Wales' leading economists. We'll be building 50,000 affordable housing. In addition, I would agree with Heath. I wouldn't want to return to the office full time. I'd want the office not to reopen full time. My wife had a lockdown baby, and it's been absolutely fantastic for me to be able to spend more time at home with my wife and with my baby daughter. So those are the 2 things: not to reopen the homeless tea because we wouldn't need it, because we've eradicated homelessness from the streets of Cardiff, and not to reopen the office full time so people can spend more quality time with their families. Diolch.
Thank you. And finally, Ruba Sivagnaram for the Labour Party, please.
Thank you. This last 12 months in terms of public health has been unprecedented. So we've had nothing by which to judge this in terms of the way we should behave. But I am hugely proud of the Welsh Government's response to the coronavirus, which has been firmly based on scientific and medical evidence. And it's been tailored to Wales's unique circumstances. And throughout the pandemic and throughout the issuing of regulations, the issuing of lockdown, Mark Drakeford and the Welsh Government have been very consistent in reviewing these regulations to ensure that they're proportionate to the level of risk. And Mark, as the First Minister, has consistently explained that the regulations are used extremely carefully, and that he would never take decisions lightly. And I believe it's right that we should work on the basis that we need strong medical and scientific evidence to justify closure and continued closure, and also the reopening. It's been incredibly hard on services, on small businesses. In Penarth, where I live, small businesses have been really hit by this, but they've also shown support for the fact that public health has been put first in these circumstances. So I have to say I'm hugely proud of the cautious approach we've taken, an approach which has received accolade from other countries around the world. Thank you.
Right, thank you all. We'll move on to the second question. Titled Social Care. Informal care provided by friends and relatives is by far the largest source of adult care provision in Wales. The voluntary sector also provides much of our social care and the support for these informal carers, some of this formally through contracts with local authorities. Much of it, however, is provided informally, but is still essential to those who rely on these services. How do you think the next Welsh Government should approach supporting unpaid carers and voluntary bodies who provide informal care? Would you be in favour of increasing Welsh taxes to fund a future of paid-for social care in Wales? If not, how do you propose that care needs to be funded in Wales? This time I would like to invite David Griffin from the Green Party first, please.
Thank you. I guess I'd give a short answer. Yes, I would approve an increase in tax for that purpose. I think the mechanism would be that the person requiring the care should get an allowance that they can use to pay the person who is giving up their time to look after them. I think the pandemic has shown everybody just how unequally the burden falls on people, and there's a lot of people who are already, shall we say, stuck in their own homes, not getting the social contact they'd like. It's been made worse when people can't go out, when people can't visit other people, and for many people, their carer is their lifeline. So yes, I would absolutely approve an increase in taxes and a fair mechanism for that money to be directed to the people who are doing this important work. That's my answer.
Thank you. Next, I would invite Heath Marshall from the Liberal Democrats, please. Apologies, Heath, I believe you're still on mute.
Yes, hello, thank you. So I support a single national care service for Wales. So the integration of the health and care service in Wales. Obviously, we must do more to recognise and value the contribution of unpaid carers. So this is a policy that I feel very strongly about, and so does my party. Now, the way we can do this, I think, is the best way would be to allocate more funding from the existing budget. So I think it's very important that that the NHS identifies and promotes the health and well-being of carers, and through the raising of awareness, as I said, more money can be allocated towards the funding of unpaid carers that have played such an important part in the caring of people through the coronavirus pandemic. And I think that in addition to that, the care allowance has to be increased. That has in the past. That's been a policy of my party, and I think that needs to be strengthened. So that's how I would personally approach it at the moment. I want to see more powers, the ability of individuals to secure their own services. I want to be looking at such things as a joint commission for those services, the local health board and local authorities working together. So there are different ways of improving social healthcare funding for the unpaid carers, not simply through raising taxes, although that's something that I would explore, but it's not something that I would immediately think of when it comes to improving the funding of that particular area. And that's my answer.
Thank you. Neil McAvoy, Propel, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't agree with raising taxes. I don't think there's a need to raise taxes. Once you look at what the Welsh Government does, there is an enormous amount of waste. There's also an enormous amount of waste within local authorities. There's a huge industry in taking children into care, for example, where billions of pounds are spent every political term. If less children were taken into care, then a hell of a lot of money could be saved. I'd like to see implementation of the Social Services and Wellbeing Act, because I think the government are good at passing legislation, but they're not really good at implementing it. We have a contract with Wales for Propel, and as part of the contract with Wales, we want to see a rights-based approach. So we're proposing a public services investigator, so that when people are not really getting the services they need, or they're having to struggle too much to get what they deserve, then there's a separate investigative body that you go to. The Ombudsman is not effective. Anyone that's been through any local authority complaints procedures knows they're not effective. We want a specific body set up to investigate public services and to stand up for the small person, the disempowered. The investigator needs to be elected. And also what we want to see is that what we would have to see, so we don't get the usual suspects, is that they've had no part to play in party politics in the previous 10 years. So I want to see implementation of the legislation. I want to see a rights-based approach backed by our contract with Wales. And thirdly, I'd like to see money saved in so many other areas, so that money can go into the sector and financially support families better.
Thank you. Rhys Ab Owen, Plaid Cymru, please.
Thank you. From a personal perspective, I can tell you that unpaid carers were struggling long before COVID. I can only just imagine the nightmare COVID and lockdown must have been for unpaid carers. The pandemic has brought to the fore that we need action. We need radical thinking. And it was disappointing to hear Mark Drakeford saying that he couldn't afford a health and social care system. Well, people use the same argument against Attlee's government and against Aneurin Bevan when they founded the NHS. The Tories are saying we can afford the NHS. We can afford a national health and care service. In fact, we can't afford not to do it because the divide at the moment is totally arbitrary. Why should somebody with some illnesses get treatment for free, but people like my father who can't dress and wash and eat himself properly, why can't he have services for free? We need social care free to all. Now, how do we do it? Well, in our fully costed manifesto, we have shown that this can be done in the first 5 years of the Senedd term. We can have a free social care for the people of Wales. What we would do in our first day in government, we would set up a commission to look at the long term, how to afford it, to consider rises in income tax and general tax, to consider a contribution levy. There are options there. What we can't do is to say we can't do it. We've got to be able to look people in the eye, unpaid carers and patients in the eyes, and say we did everything we could do, because the status quo is not good enough and we're leaving people behind. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Ruba Sivangdanan for the Labour Party, please.
Thank you for this question. It raises really important issues around unpaid care and how we should properly recognise the lifeline that informal care is to so many in all our communities. Welsh Labour values its army of unpaid carers, which is why the Welsh Government instigated the strategy for unpaid carers to secure better services for them. The pandemic led to a greater awareness and public appreciation of health and social care workers, and that appreciation should rightly be extended to unpaid carers. 370 million unpaid workers providing care worth £8.1 million. Welsh Labour recognise this, and that's why we fund 3 major charities for carers with more than £3 million in grants and another £1 million to support hardship claims. If elected, Welsh Labour will strengthen support for carers with more than support for unpaid carers through a £1 million COVID hardship fund, and fund a new £3 million short break respite scheme to help carers get the time they need for a break. However, as the question suggests, longer term reform is needed, and Welsh Labour will pursue a sustainable UK solution so that care is free for all at the point of need. If the Conservative UK government breaks its promise again and fails to bring forward a fully funded scheme within the current UK Parliament, we will consult on a potential all Wales only solution to meet our long-term care needs. A fully free system that fully integrates the NHS and care services would cost around £700 million, which we currently don't have in our Welsh budget. Every commitment made in our manifesto can be delivered within the powers and budget we have. Welsh Labour doesn't believe that this is the right time to increase taxes. So none of our spending commitments rely on increased Welsh taxes. And while we never shy away from arguing for a fairer settlement.
I'm afraid we're out of time there. Sorry, Ruba, thank you. And finally, Sean Driscoll, please, Conservative Party.
Yeah, thank you. Welsh Conservatives will not want to raise funding for social care through a social care tax. Delivering effective and compassionate social care is one of the greatest challenges and responsibilities facing governments, and we will develop a plan for sustainable social care for the future by establishing a cross-party commission to consider long-term sustainable funding solutions for social care and guarantee to provide parliamentary time to deliver its recommendations. My wife had to give up her business to care for a mother who was chronic Alzheimer's, and I saw how that affected her. So to think there are so many people, often very young, having to care for relatives day in, day out while trying to keep up with their work or their education doesn't bear thinking about, really. So our manifesto will outline more regarding social care, but we will be focusing on appointing social care officer in Wales, practical help and support for the army of young carers across Wales by reducing the barriers stopping them from education, training and employment. And we'll establish a £15 million care innovation fund to promote joint working between the NHS and social services. And we'll introduce a young carers card scheme to provide free bus travel and grants to access education, training and employment, and introduce a right to respite for unpaid carers and give them free access to training, support and carer assessments, and give them full access to mental health support, which is so important. We have to recognise voluntary organisations like one of my favourites, the Salvation Army, and many others that do fantastic work, who sometimes operate like social services. And my view is we need to recognise the work that these two groups do and look at ways of funding them and supporting them in the future. Thank you.
Right, thank you to all the candidates. I'll move on to our third question of the evening then, which is on the new schools curriculum for Wales. Young people have had to make the highest contribution to the coronavirus crisis. Their education has been profoundly affected over 2 academic years, and the uncertainty over economic damage is weighing on their shoulders. Given how much we have been able to freely spend on lockdowns, is it right that this generation of young people will have to incur huge debts to go to university in such an uncertain economy, given what they have been through? How would candidates change student finance in Wales to help reward the young for the sacrifices they have made and at least take some weight off their now overburdened shoulders? And I would invite Heath Marshall from the Liberal Democrats to answer first, please.
Okay, thank you. I would like to first of all mention the reforms to student finance that have already been implemented over the last few years. So there has been a lot of that from the Welsh Liberal Democrats in government. So we have seen an increase of part-time students. There's been an increase of 9.2% in university. There's been, I think, an increase of about 33% of postgraduates over the last 4 years, I think, since 2015, 2016. The contributions made by the party in government have increased to 17,000 total support for those students that are most in need. Obviously, there has to be more, and I want to build on these reforms that have already taken place. I should also refer to the £40 million fund that was agreed by the Welsh Government January of this year. That is obviously something that needs to be reviewed going forward, and I would like to see more help financially for students with their accommodation costs and resources and books, for example. I would also like to concentrate on part-time education and how that can be very helpful where that's combined with apprenticeships, for example. That's nothing new, of course, but it's something that's very, very important. Apprenticeships have shown how successful students have been when they've graduated, and they've been able to move more easily into within their chosen areas of specialism. So that is something that I would like to see going forward. And I think that part-time education provides more flexibility, particularly where you're actually working with an employer that is training you within that particular field. So I think there needs to be more work from the Welsh Government, or more encouragement from the Welsh Government with schemes so these apprenticeships can be set up going forward. So it's a combination of different mechanisms.
Thank you, Heath. I'm afraid that's the 2 minutes there. Neil McAvoy, please, from Propel.
Okay, it'd be good if you could maybe, do you want to meet as chair, or do we do it ourselves?
Ian might be able to help us with that.
I thought you were dealing with the muting. Really serious concern over the way children have been treated over the last 12 months. They've lost effectively at least a year of education. Again, the science says that, or the stats from the government, that the closing schools barely has any effect on the R rate, the infection rate. There's low confidence that it has any effect at all. Children are now being forced to wear masks in schools without masks being replaced during the day, so they're actually unhealthy. They should be replaced every few hours. I'm really concerned at the way that children have been let down. In terms of the actual question, I think that education is a right, not a privilege. I think, just along with the Green Party here, I think we're the only party who supports free education and is opposed to fees. I'd like to see the Welsh Government supporting students. I think there's a huge lack of doctors, consultants. Why not sponsor pupils to go through university to become doctors? You know, I want to see kids from the valleys, kids from the cities being sponsored by government, having their fees paid. And we need to give our young people, I'd say, something to look forward to. We need to get life back on track. We need to allow them to meet again outside. And I think the damage done over the last 12 months is going to be long term if it carries on much longer. And as I said, I think our youngsters deserve a lot more support, and I don't think they're getting it at the moment.
Thank you. Rhys Sabo in Plaid Cymru, please.
I think I'd just like to start by thanking children, young people, their parents, and also the teachers. I don't think it's fair to say that children have lost a year of education, because teachers have been working very hard to give them an education online. It has been very difficult for young people. I left university just before the banking crisis, and I remember how difficult it was for people the year following me going and finding jobs afterwards. Jobs which were there a year before weren't there the following year. And after COVID, it's going to be even more difficult. COVID and Brexit together making life even more difficult for our young people. So of course, we need to help them out. Plaid Cymru would reduce the tuition fee chargeable to Welsh domiciled students to £7,500 as a first step to hope to get it down to be free. We will raise grant payments associated with each student to reflect more accurately the subjects' reasonable costs. We know that some subjects cost far more than other subjects, and we've introduced direct Welsh Government support to cover the larger costs that some Welsh universities face with these more expensive subjects, to encourage them to get more medical students and get more engineering students and get more mathematical students in. We would also establish a national youth jobs guarantee. I'm also glad to see that Labour have promised this, to guarantee a job to every young person between 16 to 24. This is so important for our young people. I would make a huge change for them. Diolch.
Thank you. Ruba Sivagnanam, please, from the Labour Party.
Thank you. As this question suggests, children and young people must be our priority in our COVID recovery. And I really believe that. And as a parent of 3 teenagers myself, I know how hard this pandemic has been for our young people, both mentally and physically. And that's why, on top of our investment in 21st Century the Schools programme, the new curriculum for Wales, which will put our children at the forefront of modern learning, we will also, if re-elected, to deliver with urgency the COVID catch-up with support for the most disadvantaged and investment in children's well-being. This is key for our young people. It's an ambitious programme that will involve investment in recruitment, in recovery, and raising standards for all our children, and it will attract £72 million in new funding. Welsh Labour has introduced the most progressive and generous system for student finance anywhere in the UK. Over the last few years, the Welsh Labour government has worked with Professor Ian Diamond in a cross-party panel on reforming student finance in Wales. Wales is the only nation in Europe to deliver equivalent living cost support in grants and loans for full and part-time undergraduate and postgraduate students. Welsh students receive the equivalent of the national living wage during term time. Every undergraduate student in Wales is guaranteed a minimum level of maintenance support, and eligible full-time students receive a non-means tested £1,000 per year. In terms of funding for the future, the pandemic unlocked a sort of one-off major funding from the UK government, and it's clear this funding is not going to be continued or maintained. A Welsh Labour government will have to protect long-term policies such as student finance from any risk of dramatic drops. And as Rhys has mentioned, we are also committed to support every young person under the age of 25 to find a job, training, or education.
I'm afraid that's the 2 minutes up there. Thank you. Sean Driscoll, Conservative Party.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it has been tough for children and students in school with lockdown. We're fortunate in Cardiff West to be blessed with some of the best performing schools anywhere, which is a tribute to the pupils and the staff that have been kept working through lockdown. Having exams cancelled is a bit like training for years to be in an Olympic, to peak for the finals, to be told in 4 years when you will get a medal, but it may be gold and it may be silver or even bronze based on your last PBs. So not being able to take exams or run that race in an Olympic must be so frustrating for the students that are not taking exams. But I think the cohort that have been so impacted by the pandemic should be given the best opportunities to flourish at university. I know we will have more in our manifesto, which is launched tomorrow for students looking to enter further educations. But for a long time, Conservatives have called on a Welsh Labour-led government and universities and colleges to provide a fairer deal for learners, including, half tuition fees for those studying STEM and modern foreign languages at Welsh universities, providing students with partial refund on their tuition fees, and recognising the disruption that the pandemic has had on their learning, as well as the ability to take up employment opportunities during their course. Reducing tuition fees, therefore, would help ease the financial burden on students, as well as reflect the changes that has been delivered by teaching. Thank you.
Thank you. And now invite David Griffin from the Green Party.
Well, as Neil said, the Green Party support the idea of students being fully funded through their university time. I personally back in the 80s didn't pay any tuition fees. Back then, we understood that we invested in the students for the future benefit of the country. It's also worth saying that as a group, university students have been above average compliance with all the lockdown and COVID safety rules compared to the general population. And frequently they're vilified, but in fact, they've been far more compliant. My daughter is at university and she has spent pretty much the whole last year in a flat with 5 other people. Everything has been done online. They only go out to food shop because there's nothing else for them to do. And they're continuing to work hard. They're obviously not getting the same university experience that people would receive in a normal year. But at the same time, the university has still had a lot of the same costs. So if anybody should be closing the gap, it should be with a contribution from the government, because the universities are already struggling for finance as it is, given how much less they get in support compared to how they used to. I think it's also worth saying that it's been very stressful for a lot of school children who are coming up to exams, be they GCSE or A levels, to have the goalposts continually shifting. First, it will all be based on assessments. Then there will be exams, there won't be exams. Then it won't be any actual exam condition. And now it's closed book assessments under exam conditions. I think it could have been done a lot better than throwing it out to the schools and having the schools set exams rather than use the bodies who know how to do this. So I think we should look back on how this year's been done, and it could be done better. We've just reinforced the inequalities that were already there in the education system, and we need to do better.
Thank you. Okay, the next question we've had is on the subject of poverty and inequality in Wales. Poverty and inequality were already huge problems before the pandemic. In 2019, almost a quarter of people in Wales lived in poverty. It has already started to become clear that the pandemic has exacerbated the inequalities already present in Welsh society, with the lowest paid most likely to lose their income or be furloughed, and with basic family costs rising through scarcity. While social security itself is not devolved, how would you see low-income families better protected by the services under the control of the Welsh Government? And how could taxes collected by the Welsh Government be better utilised to support people out of poverty? And I would like to invite Neil McAvoy from Propel first, please.
Thanks. We need to grow the size of the economic cake in Wales, and with our contract with Wales, Propel has some really exciting proposals. I think it's a really well-kept secret that we've got billions upon billions of pounds worth of gas in the old mines, methane gas, which can be accessed easily. We know that we can extract 25 billion pounds worth. It can be done conventionally. It is not fracking. It's also very environmentally friendly. For example, we import gas right now from places like Qatar, and each boat carries with it a tariff of 250,000 tons of carbon dioxide. So we can have an industry, we can put people back to work in deprived communities, we can get the local economies moving. Also, we have a new Welsh Economy Act. We want to see a Welsh Stock Exchange. We want to see procurement, public contracts given to Welsh companies. For under 50% at the moment go to Welsh companies. For every 1% of that money spent in Wales with Welsh companies from public sector contracts, that would bring 2,000 jobs. So if we can add on another 50% of what we have now, then we can create 100,000 jobs. We need also cooperative community banks to attract investment and also to invest in new businesses. Crucially, housing is a massive area of injustice. So what Propel is proposing is a Housing Justice Act. And we have a very simple policy for homelessness. We house people. We have a housing first policy. And instead of building also really expensive housing out of the reach of local people, like is happening in the west of this city right now with huge environmental damage, what we want to see is houses being built and renovated for people that they can really afford. So what we need to do to look after our people is to get our economy moving.
Thank you. Rhys Abowen, Plaid Cymru, please.
Our fully costed and independently verified manifesto, the only one of all the parties to do so, has some very exciting policies and will directly help children and families in Wales. 1 in 3 children in Wales live in poverty. That was before COVID. That's under the watch of 20 years of Welsh Labour, ably assisted by years of austerity under the Tories and Lib Dems. We will offer every family £35 direct weekly payment. We would offer children free laptops, something which we've said since 2007, something which come to the fore during home education. Our childcare offer, every child in Wales would be able to have free childcare from the age of 24 months until full-time education, up to 30 hours of free childcare. And there are 70,000 children in Wales living in poverty at the moment who are not eligible for free school meals. And I cannot in the life of me understand why the Labour Party hasn't supported us in this, to ensure that every child who lives in poverty, every child whose family are in receipt of universal credit, receive free school meals. That'll be applied policy. We'll also increase the cash value of the education maintenance allowance to £45 a week, and give grants for further education students of £2,350 a year. We will also reform council tax. I know politicians don't like to say this. I know they know reforming council tax is unpopular, but we will do it because we know by reforming council tax, we expect that 20% of households in the bottom fifth will get an income redistribution. And that'll be a huge benefit to the families of Wales. Diolch.
Thank you. Ruba Sivangmanam, please, Labour Party.
Thank you. Equality has to be an issue for everyone, and because everyone, when people live in a fair and equal society, everyone in that society benefits. Welsh Labour is committed to using every possible lever at our disposal to tackle poverty. People on the lowest incomes have been consistently attacked by the austerity policies of the Tory-led UK government in the last 10 years. For example, in terms of the bedroom tax or the universal credits, waiting times, or low-paid precarious work. In Wales, we believe in helping each other through good and bad times. So whether it's through the discretionary assistance fund, free school meals, school breakfast clubs, the council tax reduction scheme, the pupil deprivation access grant, green energy schemes, free prescriptions, or the Claim What's Yours campaign, Welsh Labour has demonstrated time and time again that we will look after the people of Wales, especially our people in most need. And that's what Welsh Labour promises and delivers. At the beginning of the pandemic, we took immediate action to protect those who were homeless, providing £10 million of extra funding to ensure that no one was left without access to accommodation. So more than 2,200 people have been helped to temporary or emergency accommodation. It's a huge achievement, but there are also continuing massive challenges. As a final thought, Welsh Labour has overseen the introduction of the socio-economic duty in Wales, which will mean that public bodies will have to look at inequality of outcome for people living in poverty. This is a huge step. And it's a step that we believe in because we believe it will make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Driscoll, Conservative Party, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, poverty is a complex issue and is often interlinked with a range of social issues, such as unemployment. In fact, in a recent debate on a report by the Valleys Task Force, the Welsh Parliament voted for an amendment that stated that providing quality long-term employment opportunities is the best way to address poverty and to improve people's lives, as well as to empower our communities. Now, I agree the best route out of poverty is through better well-paid jobs and opportunity and education. I can tell you Welsh Conservatives won't want to increase in taxes, but more needs to be put into creating jobs and apprenticeship, which is why we have said we will exactly what we'll do, which is 65,000 more jobs and 150,000 more apprenticeships and investment in education. At the peak of the COVID pandemic, the furlough scheme protected the wages of nearly 400,000 people in Wales. We introduced a £20 a week uplift for universal credit. The 2021 budget also confirmed a one-off payment of £500 for people who receive working tax credit, boosting the income of families. This April, the income tax personal allowance increased to £12,570, meaning people keep more of their money. It's disappointing after 22 years of power, Labour's failed to tackle poverty in our communities. Wales currently has the highest number of people living in relative income poverty of any of the UK nations. It's vital that the next Welsh Government rebuild the economy of Wales in order to lift the financial prospects of people and working towards a fairer Wales. Thank you.
Thank you. David Griffin from the Green Party next, please.
So Sean listed a whole range of different schemes to get money to poor people, and I think that's part of what's we've developed this society where there are all these little schemes, and if you don't actually come within one of them, then you fall through the cracks. And a lot of people have fallen through the cracks during COVID. There's been furlough schemes that didn't apply to everybody. There's been things which not everybody could claim for because they hadn't been employed the right amount of time. The Green Party supports a universal basic income. It's simple to administer, and it's paid for by taxes at the higher end. And you can read many reports on how it works and how it's been tested. Had we had this in place during the first lockdown, when people stopped being able to earn money in hospitality industries, whatever, people would have been supported. We wouldn't have needed to dream up new legislation to support people. But in terms of what we need to do going forward, we need to grow the Welsh economy. We need to bring back good jobs. And the Green Party proposes a Green New Deal. There are a huge amount of green energy projects waiting to go in Wales if we would only commit to them. And we have a mechanism for funding them. The Green Party has proposed a Green Transformation Fund, effectively like green bonds, like national savings bonds, but people can invest in true green energy projects and generate a huge number of good quality jobs. Wales has superb wind, wave, tidal energy prospects, and we really should be taking advantage of these and growing that economy for Wales. And we should also be greening our housing stock, making warmer, more secure houses across the board, which will create plenty of jobs. So we should be growing the economy that way within Wales and looking after everybody.
Thank you. And then Heath Marshall, Liberal Democrats. Apologies, Heath, I believe you're possibly still on mute.
So central to the Liberal Democrats programme manifesto is putting recovery first. That's an economic, social and environmental recovery. So in terms of economics, we know, of course, that Wales, a quarter of the people of Wales live in poverty. That's going to be exacerbated due to the consequences of the pandemic. And there are no signs that that will be going away. So in terms of economics, we want to invest via the Green Recovery Programme that we have in place, investing £1 billion a year. That will include the retrofitting of all existing homes in Wales. That will also include programmes related to biodiversity, the planting of trees. This will create a significant amount of jobs. We also have in place an economic development bill. There is a £500 billion fund to help high streets and towns and city centres, supporting small businesses. I would also like to add that there's a significant number of micro businesses in Wales. We want to invest in medium-sized companies. We want to have more inward investment. We want to have more of the branch operations in Wales to create better paying jobs. There's a lack of that at the moment. Moving on to another host of packages that we have in place, we want to see free part-time childcare from 9 months up to the ages of 3, between the ages of 3 and 4, part-time free healthcare. We have a funding pot to seek to eradicate debt, and that relates to all debts that have been sold to collection agencies. We want to see those completely eradicated. We want to see up to 200,000, at least 200,000 people of the poorest debts cleared over the course of the next Senedd term. And also I would like to say that it's a Liberal Democrat policy.
That's the 2-minute limit. Thank you. Okay, the next question we have received is on the topic of local authority reorganisation. So there are currently 22 local authorities in Wales. We duplicate many senior jobs in each authority, making an inefficient use of our nation's financial resources. How many authorities do you think we should have, and how would you achieve a cut in the current figure, considering the opposition previously shown from the current councils? And this time I would invite Rhys Abbo from Plaid Cymru first, please.
Well, I'll give you my party's view, and then I'll give you my personal view. And I know this is recorded, but there are. I'll tell you my view. My party's view is that there'll be 6 planning regions in Wales, economic planning regions in Wales: Arfor, the Valleys, Clwyd, Powys, Swansea Bay, and South East. And in the manifesto, Plaid will not cut the 22 local authorities. Personally, I think they should be cut. They should have been cut many years ago. And if it wasn't for Labour ministers being scared by Labour councillors, they would have been cut many years ago. I think they should be around the 8 mark, back to the old system before 1996. To me, it doesn't make any sense at all that we have a council such as Merthyr, which is smaller than Merthyr constituency in the Senedd and in Westminster. And the whole setup in Wales is far too complicated. You have the 22 local authorities, you have the different health boards, you have the different fire services, different police services, different public service boards, a new board which is being created. And I'm speaking to people from a justice point of view, and they feel that the only thing they're doing is going to one meeting to the next because of all these overlaps with different boards. So I think we need a streamlined system in Wales. We need fewer councils, and that would lead to far less duplication. In the short term, what we need to do is to make sure some of the high jobs in council are shared between local councils.
Thank you. Ruba Sivagnanam, please, from the Labour Party.
Well, this is an interesting question for me, and I have to declare an interest because I'm a councillor myself in the Vale of Glamorgan. And you know what's really important to remember is that people like their services locally, so they like to know the people who represent them locally, and they very much like services delivered locally. Having said that, I've seen how our council is working regionally with other councils to deliver services together, to pool resources. And over the last 3 years, the Welsh Government has been working closely with councils across Wales to support the creation of resilient and effective local government that includes major changes to deliver more regional structures. So legislation passed last year, I think, will deliver a package of reforms, including measures to modernise the conduct of elections, to extend the franchise, as we know, to 16 and 17-year-olds in order to encourage more interest in local democracy. That same legislation includes powers to facilitate voluntary mergers, and it will also reform and strengthen local government democracy, accountability and performance. Part of this will require the setting up of corporate joint committees, which will have a legal entity because they can go into contracts, receive grants and employ people. And those committees will have to take some responsibilities from all local authorities who are part of that region. So things are happening to make local authorities work and share resources more.
Thank you. That's the 2 minutes again. Thank you very much. Sean Driscoll, please, from the Conservative Party.
Yeah, this is an argument that we've been having for some time, and I'm a councillor as well in Cardiff, and I know we have some services shared, which is on waste management with the Vale, and we also share shared regulatory services. But these guys are thin on the ground, and air quality is a big problem in Cardiff, and we have to share the offices between 3 authorities. So that's been really quite difficult. But some councils feel it would not work for them, and you have to ask the question, is the councils that have built up this massive reserves in their contingency funds that don't want to merge with others? I accept that some services are duplicated, like planning, for instance, in our region is proposed, as Ruba was saying, about a CJC to decide on regional decisions. But I, like the leader of Cardiff Council, have concerns that these committees might be bypassing some democracy. So there is also an argument that says we need to deliver more power to the councils. And I agree with that. We can deliver better outcomes through our councils for the communities. And my personal view is, I think that is right. This is something UK government have said they want to do, which is empowering local communities and local councils who know what's best for their communities to deliver services for them.
Thank you. Up next, David Griffin, please, from the Green Party.
Thank you. The Green Party generally believes that things should be devolved down to the most local level practicable. But in a question such as this, people will be able to find examples of why certain things should be done more locally and examples of why things make more sense to be done across a broader area and more centralized. And you can always find examples where something seems wasteful or nonsensical, that something overlaps something else. And I think rather than pick a sort of soundbite answer that's saying it should be one way or the other, I think things should be decided on a case-by-case basis. I think where a region, an area, a town has unique challenges, I think they should be administered by a local organization that is aware of their local challenges, rather than sort of distantly administered from afar. But as I say, to generalize and say that everything should be central or everything should be local, I think we've seen things swing both ways over the years with schools. We've had more local control in schools, and then we've had more national curriculum control, and people have rebelled against both extremes. So with a general guiding principle of democracy being as local as practicable, I would say that you take each example of what makes sense on its own merits, and you allow local authorities to cooperate when it makes sense to be efficient.
Thank you. Over to Heath Marshall from the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you. I would first of all like to say that attempts by the Welsh Government to reorganise local government have failed to secure broad support from councils or the public to date. On that basis, I would like to first of all say that as a Liberal, the dispersal of power, obviously from the centre to the local level, is a very important principle for me and my party. We want to see greater accountability and democratic oversight with local councils. We believe that the key principle of local government should be that public services are delivered at the lowest geographical scale. So moving forward with those principles in mind, we have a number of measures that we want to implement. We want to have a new structure of councils, amalgamation of town and community areas into meaningful and efficient units of public service delivery. We obviously want to have greater accountability and autonomy for councils. Local democracy is important. The electoral system, we're generally a party of proportional representation. We want to see that implemented in local authorities by way of the single transferable vote. We want to investigate frontline services and responsibilities being redistributed from the principal councils to the lowest possible level. And the use of technology as well, supported by the Welsh Government, hubs, for example, and the local central government providing support in that regard. So it's more of a case of strengthening democracy at the local level, as opposed to a policy of trying to reduce the number of councils. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Neil McAvoy from Propel, please.
Reduce the number of local authorities, yes. How? Well, with our contract with Wales, Propel is proposing a modern direct democracy act. What we want is a Welsh constitution. We want to see a Welsh Bill of Rights. We want to see 8 local authorities, roughly based on the old county model. We want each local authority to be elected via proportional representation, STV, as mentioned. We also think that each area should have a directly elected governor. What we're also proposing is that each county should be sovereign. So of matters which pertain to them, they should have the sovereign right to rule as they wish, very similar to what they do in Switzerland in terms of the cantons over there. We'd also like to see more generally a directly elected First Minister. So what we have is an overall package really of modern democracy. It's badly needed now, because I never thought I'd live in Wales where it was illegal for me to go canvassing with other people, as was passed 5 weeks ago. I think that the law only changed on Monday, so I could have been prosecuted for canvassing with other people. It beggars belief. I really do regret I'd say the manipulation of democracy with such a measure, because if I would have been selling double glazing, I could have gone with as many people as I had wished. So there are really serious democratic issues in Wales which we need to address. We also want to give people the ability to call referenda themselves. So there's this issue, the concept of a direct democracy. So if you care deeply about something, you can raise a petition and you can have a referendum on it if you get enough signatures. Back to the original question, too many local authorities, absolutely. Do we reduce them? Yes, we do. And we do it through Propel's Modern Direct Democracy Act.
Thank you very much. Okay, before I go into the final question, we're actually doing very well indeed on time. So I'm minded to allow 3 minutes per candidate when we come to the free time at the end, as opposed to the 2 minutes I'd mentioned to all previously, but I thought I'd mention it now. So you've at least got a few minutes while we run through the final question to think about how you might make best use of that extra little bit of time. Okay, so the final question then is with regards to public sector pay. So public sector workers have been essential to the provision of services for many of our elderly and vulnerable citizens during the pandemic. Would you support a fair pay increase for all civil and public servants in Wales and the end of unfair pay disparities within the Welsh devolved sector? And for this question, I'd invite Ruba Sifignanem, please, from the Labour Party to answer first.
Thank you. The Welsh Government's consistently opposed the UK-imposed freezes on public sector pay and is committed to making Wales a fair work nation. But obviously, having said that, it's the UK Government that determines the size of the funding available for public sector pay in Wales. So that limits the Welsh Government's ability to go further. Welsh Labour stands proudly with public sector workers across the board. We are and will continue to implement the recommendations of the Fair Work Commission we established, and we're committed to passing a Social Partnership Act this term to strengthen our support for public sector workers. You know, here in Wales, Vaughan Gethin, as the Health Minister, confirmed that the Welsh Government had not recommended any ceiling on NHS pay after it was revealed that the Tories had pushed the 1% cap to the pay review body. And we also provided, the Welsh Government also provided a £500 payment for for most of the health and care workforce. And that's benefited, over 200,000 people in Wales, including 103,000 social care workers, 90,000 NHS staff, and 2,000 odd deployed students, 26,000 primary care staff, which includes pharmacy, GP, dental staff, and so on. So yes, we do support public sector in Wales, because that they are the bedrock of the workforce in Wales. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Driscoll, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, talking specifically on nurses' pay commitment, and I am biased because my daughter is a nurse at UHW caring for COVID patients, and nobody deserves a pay rise more than them. And personally, I think the hard work and commitment they've shown, their pay should be brought into line with other professions. There's an independent pay body review currently underway, and we'll accept the outcome of what that is. But just as important as pay, that we need to give people full access to mental health services as well. And for care workers, we will introduce a Welsh minimum care wage of £10 an hour to boost care workers' pay across Wales in recognition of their vital work. And you're right, I know our council staff went way over and above commitment during the pandemic, changing from their normal day-to-day jobs to delivering services for the elderly and those isolating, and delivering equipment to care homes. And this was overseen by some top officials. And there are some executives in Wales that are on very good pay, and some are well paid, and they deserve to be too. But as was pointed out in a recent budget meeting we had, a 2% raise across the board for someone on close to 180k plus pension contributions is a little bit different to somebody on 20k. So rather than an across the board approach, personally, I'd like to see those on lower pay grades uplifted more, which I feel is only fair.
Thank you. David Griffin, please.
Well, taking the example specifically of nurses, the Green Party supports a 15% pay rise for nurses. They've been left to fall behind over many years of pay freezes. It's clear that it's a very difficult and essential job, and we've seen that through the pandemic, and yet we're struggling to fill the gaps in recruitment. So it's pretty clear that we need to make it more attractive for people to be nurses. But in many cases, there's more to it than just the pay. If you ask people who leave the service why they leave, they'll probably describe other people leaving and not being replaced, improving the workload, people delaying replacement to save a bit of money, and there never seems to be any where there is a safe level of staffing for something, the pressures on health service management who are incentivized to save money mean that they pressurize their workforce to the extremes they can before returning to correct staffing. And so I think there's more than just pay to fix. But generally, I mean, the question was about fair pay, and the next question is who defines fair. And I would agree with the idea that people on some of the lowest pay grades deserve more of an uplift. But I think if you have an independent pay review body and they make a recommendation, I think government should then honor it, not only honor it if it suits them and not if it doesn't.
Thank you. Heath Marshall, please.
Yes, thank you. So a care in recovery means valuing staff, carers and volunteers. We owe a debt to our health and care workforces and the many unpaid carers in our communities. The pandemic has shown how essential our NHS is. I want to work with unions to deliver a meaningful pay increase to increase the pay of nursing and to help retain talent and recruitment, which is very important. The safe staffing levels of nurses is something also I want to comment on. That's something that's already been implemented. I think when wards are properly staffed, they're able to deliver services in a more effective and safe manner. That's obviously very, very important indeed. And it also reduces the need for readmission. I want to concentrate also on investment in mental health, which is very important, particularly now. That is something that requires investment in resources and professionals and nursing within that field. So that is something that I would specifically concentrate on, particularly at this juncture. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil McAvoy, next, please.
Thanks. First of all, I'd like to just flag up my own personal record of a decision maker in the public sector in relation to pay. I was deputy leader of Cardiff from 2008 to 12, and the first thing I did was freeze councillors' pay, which didn't make me too popular with some people. I also took half the deputy leader's allowance, which was available to me, and we restructured the management, and we removed almost all salaries of over £100,000 a year. So that was me making decisions. In terms of the wider public sector, I had the pleasure and honour really to be invited to speak at a nurses rally down the bay in the summer, and I was supporting and still support a fair pay increase for them. They're not getting it. They're way behind. I think it's unfair, and I'm concerned as well that the headlines generated by the government, the £500 extra for bonus for carers, for example, where if, as a lot of those people are on benefits, in-work benefits, they got as little as £14 a month, £14 from that bonus. The government refused to support the nurses' fair pay increase, and yet there's a bonus just before the election. I'm concerned as well at the privatisation of services that we've seen under Labour over the last 20 years. And you have now effectively private companies running services in Wales. They're called charities, but they operate independently. And I think there's a massive issue there with frontline workers getting low pay and chief executives having huge salaries, usually politically connected chief executives. I think it helps if you're connected to the Labour Party. In terms of looking after people in the public sector, I'd like to see these indirect taxes taken away. Council tax, it's scandalous how much that costs. The minimum pricing for alcohol, that should go as well. And what we need is a justice-based approach to public sector pay.
Thank you. Rhys Bowen, please.
Thank you very much. Again, so much has come to the fore because of the pandemic, and we've really shown how reliant we are often on people earning very little wage, and that needs to change. We implied would raise the minimum wage of care workers to £10 and introduce parity of pay between the health and the care system. It's not fair at the moment how little carers within our nursing homes and residential homes are earning. We would support a fair pay increase for all civil and public servants in Wales and end the unfair pay disparity within the Welsh devolved sector. But we need to make sure that nobody is left behind. We need to remember everyone who's been supporting us during this very difficult time. We need to remember the binmen, the postmen, the shop workers, the delivery drivers, often working for large firms, international firms on very little money, applied as policies to create our own firms to support workers. These are people who have put their own health, their own lives at risk, and also those of their families. Often people who have been forced to go out to work because they didn't have the benefit, they couldn't afford to stay at home and isolate. We owe them a huge degree of thanks, and we can't let this opportunity pass. Diolch.
Thank you. Okay, so before we run into the free time that I've already mentioned previously, I will just allow the candidates to take a quick comfort break. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, what's the running order now of this?
For the free time?
Yeah.
So we're now back to the same running order we had on question 1. So that starts with Sean, then David, Heath, yourself, then Rhys, then Ruba.
We're not live now, are we?
I believe this is probably, it is a live broadcast, I think, Ian. Is it?
Still live. A couple of questions. I was on reduced screen, so I didn't see the bloody clock in the corner. It made it a lot easier.
Right, apologies, yeah.
Because the first one, I didn't answer that too well because I didn't see the clock, But
well, I thought, yeah, we've in fairness, we've rattled through the questions, so yeah, hopefully there's a bit of extra time now to.
Yeah, I noticed I was cut off when I was. I could see my mouth moving, no sound.
We just thought it was the fairest, to stick to the
exactly.
2 minutes was probably the fairest way all around.
It's my fault for not looking at the clock.
Keeping Ian on his toes as well. There we are. He's had to reset the timer to 3 minutes now as well.
Oh, what do we do before Zoom?
Sorry.
What do we do before Zoom? I hadn't heard of it before the crisis.
I hadn't heard of Zoom. No, we use a similar system called WebEx. But yeah, Zoom seems to have come from absolutely nowhere to sort of taking over the world.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, all the time we used to waste. I mean, like, I think this is going to be a feature going forward, isn't it, for everyone now? Whenever we get back to normal.
I think so. Yeah, I think it'll be here to stay. Certainly a lot more prevalent than it was prior to the pandemic.
I'd like to see it kept in the Parliament as well, because I think it would make it a lot easier for example, mothers, maybe dads that have got care duties as well, to be able to be elected. So I think it's a big barrier having to. If you live, say, West Wales, it's a big barrier having to be in Cardiff Monday to Thursday.
Yeah.
Whereas if you take part in meetings virtually, then it's much better.
I'm just going to quickly refill my water whilst the others are off as well. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, while we wait for the candidates to return and join us for the wrap up with the free time session, I would just take the opportunity to remind everybody that at 1 minute to midnight tonight is the deadline for registering to vote. So for any of those of you out there who perhaps have left things to the last minute, act quickly and get over to the gov.uk website. I think I'm right in saying as well that tomorrow is the cutoff for expressing a preference or registering for a postal vote as well. So please be mindful of that. I can see our candidates are filtering back in. Reece, your little ones followed instruction impeccably this evening. May as well fill the silence with some free advertising as well for the Radyr Morganstown Association. So we do have, even with the restrictions of lockdown, we do have a bit of a mini festival planned in May. So it's not quite our usual setup, but we're trying to make the most of the situation. So please head either to the radyr.org.uk website, where you'll find a subsection that links to our dedicated festival website, and keep an eye on our social media pages where you'll find all the information. We're also hoping, a little outside of what we normally do, to run a more traditional festival for Radyr Morganstown in September, as opposed to during May, when we're all crossing our fingers and toes that we might be able to have some of the events that we all look forward to back out in the open. So yeah, if everybody could join us in keeping your fingers crossed for that, that would be appreciated. Okay, so I believe we're all back. Ruba, are you with us? Great. Okay, so as previously mentioned, then that does conclude our prepared questions for the evening. So I will now offer a further 3 minutes to each candidate in turn to allow a statement to voters, which can include any responses to points that have been brought up during this evening's questions and discussion. And I would invite Sean Driscoll, please, to start us off.
Thank you, Tom. Firstly, Tom, I'd like to thank yourself for hosting the event this evening, and for Ian for inviting me. And thank you to all the residents of Radyr Morganstown who tuned in. What this pandemic has taught us is people are willing to make huge sacrifices for themselves and their families, and if there's almost as if their life depends on it. Also, incredible acts of kindness. What COVID-19 has also shone a spotlight on is the state of the Labour-run Welsh NHS, the only government to cut their health budget. Cancer waiting time targets have not been met since 2008. A&E targets haven't been met ever. And the Labour Health Minister recently said we don't need a plan yet for the people waiting for life-saving heart surgery and operations for those in chronic pain until the pandemic is over. Now, while Labour argued the toss on independence and splitting the United Kingdom and demanding more powers, while they can't deal with the powers they already have. And like the Labour Council, who can't even organise collecting a green bin on the right day. Now, around 13,000 people in Cardiff West voted Conservative in general elections, and if those same people voted Conservative in this election, I'm confident we do quite well, even maybe close to winning. And if you vote Plaid, Liberals, or any others, you get Labour. If you vote Abolish, you may feel you've made a political point. but you get Labour. Labour who said they wouldn't build on the greenfields of Cardiff West and protect the green belt. Labour who caused traffic chaos for the people of Cardiff West. If you vote for me and Welsh Conservatives in this election, you get Conservatives who have a plan to invest year on year in our hospitals and NHS, invest in our transport infrastructure and invest in education, and build back our economy and invest and address the climate change. A strong Wales and a strong United Kingdom, we will invest in our greatest assets, and that's our young people and their futures. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass over to David Griffin from the Green Party next, please.
I'd like to thank you again for setting up this event. It's been great. We've learned a number of things from the pandemic. We've learned, for example, that some of the lowest paid people are some of the most essential. And that is why the Green Party have always been backing the universal basic income. Another thing we've learned is that governments can spend large amounts of money when they finally recognize there's a crisis. And I remember in the general election in 2019, when the Greens proposed a bold way of dealing with the climate crisis, the major party said, "Oh, that kind of money isn't available. It's not possible to spend that kind of money." And then come COVID, it turns out that kind of money is available. Another thing we've learned is that all the people who said, no, we can't telecommute, we absolutely have to go in person to meetings, we absolutely have to drive everywhere. It's remarkable just how much we've been able to do without traveling, without flying to Amsterdam every day, without, all these things that were absolutely essential for business. It's turned out we can do quite well without them, which is remarkable. We've also learned just how important green spaces are for people. For a lot of people, being able to get out and walk in some fields, in some woods, has been an absolute lifeline. And we don't have enough valuing of those places. It seems that planning rules are sort of almost whatever you can get away with. We look right now in Cardiff West, and there is a huge housing development in the northwest. But by some accounts, almost twice what the total housing need for Cardiff is, potentially, if it goes to the full 7,000 houses. And yet, at the same time, there are people wanting to destroy a patch of woodland to build 36 houses in Danes Court Wood. And this makes no sense. We can't possibly need to destroy a piece of green space for 36 houses when someone's building thousands of houses less than a kilometre away. It's important to have transparency. People should see exactly how decisions are being made about things that affect them. I know people in Morganstown were told about what was happening to the playing fields as a result of the railway electrification project. They were told that a football pitch was going to have to be removed, that the children's skate park was going to have to be removed. When a protest group was formed, there was almost immediately a sort of back down and, okay, we won't actually lose the football pitch and we won't actually lose the skateboard park, which indicates there was a plan B ready to go. You just have to protest to get the better outcome. And I think people shouldn't have to protest to be treated fairly. We should have people thinking of green spaces, of amenities. It should be part of the planning. It shouldn't have to be fought for. Thank you.
Thank you. Heath Marshall, please, from the Liberal Democrats.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Tom, for inviting me tonight. And I'd like to thank you, the residents also of Radyr and Morganstown. I would like to say that to date, we've achieved so much, I think, through the last government with Kirsty Williams in as a minister, education minister, as part of the government. I would like to say to the people that if they choose the Liberal Democrats, they will have achieved so much more with more Liberal Democrats in Parliament, and we'll be able to advance and take forward the educational achievements that we have generated to date. I would also like to say that we are putting recovery first. We are putting an economic recovery. We have a fully costed manifesto. I've been through parts of that tonight. We are focusing on social care. I've focused tonight on elements of that, unpaid carers, for example. As part of that, we have the desire to invest, as I've said before, in mental health. We want to see a lot more investment in those areas. The one area that we want to really focus on is the environmental recovery. We have the desire to invest £1 billion a year, which I've already referred to. That also involves focusing on green space. For example, we are against the Northern Meadows development, although we are in favour of cancer research and cutting edge research within that field. We don't think that is something that should be pursued. We value the environmental benefits and health benefits of open spaces, and we want to invest more in those areas. So going forward, the policies that I've discussed tonight, this is something that we as a party will focus on. And after everything that people have been through, the recovery is the most important. And that is what I want to focus on if you decide to elect me as your candidate for Cardiff West. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil McAvoy, Propel, please.
Thanks, Chair. I hope that everyone at home has enjoyed the meeting tonight. What we have in front of us now is a historic Welsh election. We must restore our freedoms. I never thought, as I said earlier, we would live in a country where political canvassing for more than one person was outlawed, against the law, legislated against, and yet people who sell double glazing were allowed to be out with as many people as they liked. I never thought I'd live in a Wales where parents couldn't buy winter clothes for their children during winter, and the advice is just go to Amazon. What we've seen over the last 12 months is a historic and huge transfer of wealth from working class people, from middle class people to the super rich. Wales itself is a very unjust country, and what Propel is about is standing up for the individual, for the community, and empowering individuals and empowering communities. We have our contract with Wales, which we've set out with 10 laws that we want to implement. One of the most crucial laws for us in Cardiff West is the Planning for Wales Act. We will abolish LDPs. So a vote for Propel will stop Cardiff's local destruction plan, because that's what it is, in its tracks, of campaigns against the LDP since 2009. I'm the only politician in Wales to have campaigned continuously against the local development plan in the Senedd. Nobody else has done it. What we also need, and what Propel is proposing, is emergency legislation to protect our greenfield sites. We mustn't forget either that 80,000 tonnes of nuclear mud, which scientists say contain plutonium, was dumped just a mile off Cardiff into the sea, and they want to come back and dump a further 1 million tonnes. Absolutely unbelievable. But if you re-elect a Labour government, that is what will happen. Cardiff West needs a strong voice to stand up for it, a voice for communities. I was just 3.7% behind Mark Drakeford last time. The Conservative candidate said he could do fairly well, but he can't win. Plaid Cymru cannot win either. A vote for Plaid Cymru is a vote for the Labour Party. By voting Propel, you are backing a strong candidate, a strong party that will shake up Welsh politics. We have a cosy consensus, which we must end, and we must make devolution work for the people. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Rhys Abowen, please, next. Plaid Cymru.
Thank you. Just to reiterate the thanks to Tom, Ian and everyone behind the scenes for making this possible. During the pandemic, it's even more important that we have evenings like this and that democratic accountability and scrutiny continues. So thank you very much, Tom. I hope for you at home that my answers tonight have shown you that that Plaid Cymru is the only party here tonight that has the ambition for Wales through its fully thought through and fully and independently verified and costed manifesto. Free social care for all, free childcare for everyone over 24 months, jobs and education for everyone between 16 and 24. These aren't pie in the sky ideas. These aren't coming from Theresa May's infamous money tree. These have been fully costed and independently verified by Wales's most eminent economists. I commend the work of the Welsh Government during COVID-19. I commend their cautious approach, but that isn't good enough from now on. What we need is ambition. We haven't seen ambition for the period going out of COVID from Welsh Labour. We saw the answer from Ruba with regards to social care. We saw that answer from Mark Drakeford last night in the leaders' debate with regards to establishing social care. We have to get the money from Westminster. Well, Ruba, Mark Drakeford, you will not be getting that support and that money from Boris Johnson. They do not care about us. We are an afterthought at best in Wales. So if you want to establish a social care unit, we need to do it ourselves. So come on, Ruba, come on, Mark, a bit of ambition for Wales, because that's what we have through Plaid Cymru. You wouldn't have had Nye Bevan relying on the Tories to establish the NHS. Why is Welsh Labour now relying on Boris Johnson and Westminster to establish social care? We have a positive campaign here in Cardiff West. Plaid Cymru was the one who came second to Labour last time. Whatever McAvoy says and tries to tell people, whatever his narrative is, we were the second party, and we will be the only ones that can beat Mark Drakeford next time. Mr. McAvoy will not be in the Senedd after the election. We will continue to scrutinise the local development plan. We can't abolish it, as Neil says, because we need a plan. But what we have are overestimated figures, and what we need is affordable housing within our cities, rather than continuing to extend our city time and time again. And I commend David Griffin, what David Griffin says with regards to what the madness of building in a small and pleasant wood in Danescourt. We have a great team in Radyr through Plaid Cymru. We will continue to scrutinise the Transport of Wales development in Morganstown. Vote for change, vote for Plaid Cymru. Diolch yn fawr.
That's the 3 minutes. Thank you. Apologies, mute button. And finally, Ruba Sivangnanam, please, from the Labour Party.
You know, I moved to Wales just over 10 years ago now, and what's really, the thing that really struck me about moving to Wales is what an open community it is. That in Wales, Wales's DNA is about supporting each other. It's about community, and that is what the Labour Party is about. The Labour Party believes in community. It believes in helping those who are in need, and I think our record speaks for itself. And what we pledge to do if we're re-elected, if you re-elect Mark Drakeford, is that we build on that. So we will guarantee that we will guarantee work or employment or education for every under 25-year-old. We will build back better and stronger for Wales. We will make sure there is a catch-up programme in the NHS and in education, and that work is already beginning. So these are the things that we will pledge and do, and more. And I am not going to reiterate what we've already discussed in the really good questions that have been raised already. And locally, I think what we're demonstrating locally with the housing, with the road and the speed limits, is that Welsh Labour does listen to its communities. We come out of these communities and we want to listen to these communities, and that's why we will listen. We will review the housing development. We are pledging to bring a 20 mile per hour speed limit across Wales, because we believe in those things and we listen to our communities, and we will continue to listen to our communities and continue to work with our communities. And so I would ask you to vote for Welsh Labour, and particularly if you're a young person, whatever you do from this evening, I would urge all 16 and 17-year-olds to read all the parties' manifestos and really learn what this election's about, because this is your future, and your future is in Welsh Labour. Thank you.
Thank you. And that actually concludes this hustings. So all that's left for me to do is say, on behalf of the RMA, my sincere thanks to all the candidates for taking the time to join us this evening and for your valued contribution. Thank you also to everyone who submitted questions and to the viewers who've joined us tonight. I hope you've all found this event both interesting and informative. Thanks to all, and good night. Diolch.
Excellent. Thanks, Ian.